Hello, welcome to Cooking Time. I'm David Martone, Executive Chef at Classic Thyme Cooking School in Westfield, New Jersey. Today we're going to be cooking up pasta, 20-minute pasta. I like to call it macaroni. This is a fun class. It was actually one of the first classes that I taught, and I like to do 20-minute dishes because it's just real easy to do, and you come home from work and you don't want to make a big mess or just get into a lot of hassle of cooking, so you do something real quick and you get it flavorful and healthy and just have a good time with it. I'm going to start off with my staple sauce called a 20-minute marinara sauce. Marinara sauce is very simple, very few ingredients. We're going to use some garlic, some oil, some basil, and some canned tomatoes. So why don't we get started? I'm going to take some garlic that we already have peeled. Just going to chop this up, maybe a few more pieces. Can never use too much garlic. This is a great dish. My wife makes this a couple of times a week. We use this as a basic sauce for many different things. We put it on pizza, we put it on macaroni, we use it to dip things in if we're making some fried zucchini or some fried mushrooms and we need a little dipping sauce. It's interesting, the terms pasta, macaroni. I grew up and it was all called macaroni. Macaroni is actually a shaped pasta. And pasta gets its name from the Italian word pasta, which really translates to paste. And it's basically a paste made with a semolina flour and water and a little bit of oil. And traditionally, we make a lot of the macaroni or pasta doughs without egg. So we just coarsely chop up a little bit of garlic. Never use the garlic that is in the jar with the water. You can buy your garlic already peeled, but it must be dry. Never use the stuff in the water or the oil. We'll kick up our saute pan a little bit and put some olive oil and saute that garlic around a little bit. We never want to over saute the garlic because if you cook the garlic too much and it darkens too much, it will get very bitter. So we always use the back of the knife when we're going to scrape things off the cutting board. Once we put the heat under this, we're going to want to regulate it a little bit so that, again, we don't burn the garlic because we'll have a very bitter flavor in the sauce. If you're not paying attention and you overcook the garlic, simply throw it away and start over. The garlic is pretty cheap and you've only wasted a couple of minutes of time. So we're going to get that sauteing nice. Next up, we have to get our tomatoes. Now, the tomatoes, we're buying canned plum tomatoes, and I'm not too particular to any brand. However, I do like the generic brands in the store. They're California tomatoes. They're pretty rich and sweet in flavor. I happen to be using a lot of this brand lately because my dad shops for me, and whenever there's big can sales, he runs out and he'll get 100 of these for 59 cents. So he shows up with 40 bags of tomatoes and olive oil and all kinds of great things that we go through a lot of. So right now we happen to be using the latest brand that was on sale. Certainly if you can find the San Marzano tomatoes, they're more of a pear-shaped tomato, and you need to go to Italian specialty stores to find those. You will get a nice, rich, flavored sauce, and they are wonderful. What we do with these is we just stick our finger in them, and then we just break them up, and see how they squirt as soon as you squeeze them. I don't know if that got on me, but if you're standing there or if somebody's standing in front of you, when this squirts, it's going to get either you or the person in front of you. So we just break them up a little bit like this with our hands, and then we're going to put them right in the pot. I am going to show you another trick to do this, because anything we can do to save a little bit of time certainly will cut down the amount of aggravation we have, and we certainly don't want to have that. Our garlic is getting nicely golden on the edges, and that's just about where I want to be. So when that happens, you need to stop the cooking quickly. So what we do is we put in our tomatoes. It'll splash a little bit, but it'll immediately stop the cooking of the garlic, and you won't have any problems with it burning or turning bitter. So you hear that sizzling. I'm just putting all these tomatoes in, and I'm going to reserve the liquid until I see how much liquid is going to come out of these tomatoes. Now, the trick I was referring to was your handy-dandy potato masher. We just crush these up with our potato masher. It saves a little bit of time in having to squish them up with your fingers. Although if you get home from work and your kids are there And you need a little job for your kids. Certainly give them the bowl, the tomatoes, and you'll have about 15 minutes to go and get dressed and have them nice and quiet. And you'll also be introducing them to the culinary world. And in most cases, they'll actually taste things they wouldn't normally eat because they've participated in the process of cooking. So it's a good little starting point to get kids involved, and they can do that at a very young age. You'll see this is splashing up a little bit, but not quite as bad as when I was squeezing them by hand and worrying about it squirting up at you. Certainly put an apron on if you have any clothes that you're worried about staining, because the tomatoes will stain, and unless you get to it right away, it takes a little bit of time to get it out. So I crush up my tomatoes with my potato masher, and then I'm going to add back some of the liquid. Just want to go around here one more time, make sure that it's crushed up good. By doing it in a saute pan, it allows you to cook it even quicker because you have a bigger surface that the tomatoes are actually cooking on. Okay. I'll add a little bit more of that juice back. Actually, I'm going to add it all. Get that cooking. Put this in the sink. Ready for our next component to the dish, which is actually the last thing we're going to do aside from seasoning it. We need a little bit of basil. So we're going to take some basil sprouts and just pick off the leaves. Whenever we do basil, we never want to chop it real fine, because what happens is the basil bruises and starts to get black and all dark in color. So we take our basil and we just roll it up just like this. And we're going to do what's called a chiffonade, and I'm sure if you've watched the show you've seen me do this several times before. We've rolled up the leaves of the basil, and now we're taking our knife and we're just taking little slivers off the basil. Very, very thin, and it's called a chiffonade. We'll have these little threads of the basil, and I'm cutting through it rather than chopping it and crushing it. And again, that's going to prevent it from bruising. So here's our nice chiffonade of basil. I've also, on occasion, just torn the basil up and left it in larger pieces. For this dish, I want to leave it in a little bit smaller chiffonade. And see how this is just nice and fluffy. Okay, the marinara sauce is starting to simmer. Going to add our chiffonade of basil, stir that in, and get to work on the next dish. Okay. At the very end of the cooking with this, we will season it with salt and pepper, but we don't want to do that until the end, because while this cooks, it will reduce down a bit. So if I season it to the liking of my taste now, and it reduces down, it will be overly seasoned at the very end, and there'll be no way to compensate for that other than to re-add more liquid and kind of start all over. So we're just going to let that simmer, and we'll get started on the next one, which is going to be our carbonara sauce. Get our pan heating up a little bit. Let's clean up our board and knife a little. Okay. Starting for the carbonara, we have to use some pancetta. Pancetta is Italian unsmoked bacon. And if you look carefully at it, you can see how each piece, it's rolled up, so it's actually like a sheet of bacon that's just been rolled. Very same cut of meat. It's just rolled and processed without smoking it. So we're going to make some cubes out of this. You can also use regular smoked bacon. You will have that smoky component to the dish. So the pancetta is a very nice alternative to the smoky bacon.